Tea was my first Halloween on Hammy Street, and I was excited. I had just moved into the neighborhood the week before, and I was hoping to meet some of the kids on the street as I filled my bag with treats. Mom hadn't planned on moving so close to Halloween, but you know when your dad decides he needs the house for his mistress and her kids, you have to pick up and go pretty quickly. The court had made him buy Mom out of half the house, but that wasn't too difficult for him. We'd found a very nice house on Hammy Street, a street full of families and little cracker box houses, but unpacking hadn't left me much time to make friends. So now, standing on the front doorstep in my homemade ghost costume, I was ready to make some friends. The costume was last minute. My mom had actually forgotten about it during the move, and when I reminded her about it an hour ago, she had realized that there was no time to buy one. So she scrounged around, found some old sheets, poked a few eye holes in them, and there you have it, a classic ghost costume. It looked kind of lame next to all the superheroes and cartoon characters stomping up and down the street, but I liked it. It reminded me of Charlie Brown from the storybook I had on my bookshelf, and as I set off, I wondered if anyone would actually give me a rock. I didn't get a stone, but I did get a lot of looks from the people around me. I was expecting a few laughs, maybe some questions about why I didn't have a real costume, but what I got was something between fear and contempt. People stepped out of my way. The adults looked down at me in disbelief, and many of the children looked frightened. I had to look at the front of the sheet a few times to make sure there weren't any stains or anything. None of them wanted to talk to me. Most of the children turned away from me, and the people in the houses refused to give me sweets. They would slam the door in my face almost immediately, some of them telling me to be ashamed of myself before they did it. So I sat on the pavement, trying not to cry and wondering why I'd bothered to come out at all. I hadn't met anyone. I hadn't made any friends. I felt like I should have just gone home an hour ago. So when the group of other kids in ghost costumes walked down the street, they were pretty easy to spot. There were 5 of them, their ghost costumes looking dirty and tattered. And as they walked like a line of spooky ducklings, the crowd parted for them too. They didn't stop at any houses. They didn't speak to anyone. They just kept going up the road like an arrow fired from a bow. For some reason, they felt drawn to follow them. To this day, I can't say why. Maybe I felt some kind of kinship, or maybe it was the way people treated them, but whatever it was, I got up and ran to catch them. My shoes hit the concrete as I ran. The other children watched me go with real concern, but I didn't care. These kids seemed to have made the same mistake I had, and it seemed better to be an outcast as a group than alone. "Hey, wait up!" I shouted. The 5 ghosts completely ignored me as we walked on. We walked in a line of 6 ghosts, and I tried to make conversation with them. They looked to be about my age, or at least my size, and they were all carrying brightly colored candy bags that were in the same sorry state as their costumes. They were covered in mud, torn in places, and the boy in front of me was wearing shoes with the soles coming loose. His left sole was going whap, whap, whap on the tarmac, and I wondered what kind of costumes these were. Were they some kind of zombie ghosts or something? Next to my clean white sheet, they looked downright filthy, and I wondered why their parents had let them leave the house like that. Where are we going?" I finally asked, and they all left my neighborhood as we turned a corner into a less crowded street. I promised my mom I wouldn't go too far, and I don't know these streets very well. They ignored me, but I didn't have long to walk. I'd seen the house before. Mom and I had stared at it as we drove into town. It stood out. The grass was long, the fence ragged, but the house was the center of the unkempt space. It had probably once been a very nice single-story house, but it looked as if someone had pelted it with eggs or dirt, or both, and the owner hadn't bothered to clean it up. The windows were boarded up, the shingles were tattered from the roof, and someone had spray-painted "Killer" in big red letters on the garage door. It was impossible not to notice, and I realized too late that this was our destination. Are we trick-or-treating there? I don't think anyone lives there. They didn't say anything, but a few minutes later, I realized I was wrong. I could see a light peeking through a crack in one of the boarded-up windows, and as the ghosts arrived on the pavement, it was suddenly covered by a shadow. The ghosts did not approach the house. They didn't even come off the pavement. They just stood there, bags in hand, staring at the house. The shadow moved away from the opening a few times, but it always came back in a flash. It was a fickle thing, moving away only to come back faster and faster to check that the ghosts were still there. I kept turning to look at them, asking what we were doing and getting no answer. The ghost children just stood there staring, their dark, painful eyes boring into the house. I think it was then that I really got a good look at them. Their sheets weren't just dirty. They were covered in muddy marks. Some of the stains looked like they could be blood, but the worst was the bare stretch of leg under the sheets. The skin on those legs, they were cut and bleeding, purple bruises, and the arms were in a similar state of abuse. The eyes were the worst. Out of the open holes looked darkened eyes, purple with rings. The kids looked like they had gone 10 rounds with a professional boxer, and the part that usually had color was pitch black and unblinking. These children weren't interested in sweets. They were after something else. I had opened my mouth to ask them why they were just standing there, when suddenly the door opened and a man in dirty, sweat-stained clothes walked out. He was wearing tracksuit bottoms and a tank top, and his bare feet looked like he had kicked them so many times that every toe was broken. He was thin to the point of being skeletal, and his clothes hung off him like rags. At first I feared he might be drunk, weaving and swaying across the yard, but the closer he got, the more I realized he was stone sober. He wasn't stumbling, he was scared, and it took everything he had to approach the ghost children. "What do you want?" he stammered, his foot catching on something in the tall grass. Why do you torture me?" The grass was so tall you could hear the dry husks scraping against his trousers, but if it bothered him, or 5 other little ghosts, it never showed. "Haven't I suffered enough? The city won't let me forget, my ex-wife won't let me forget, and now you come back every Halloween to remind me of my mistakes. Why leave me alone? Haven't I suffered enough?" He stumbled again, this time catching his foot hard, and as he bumped into me, he narrowly missed being knocked down. That's when he realized, oh, this was something else. He looked at me in disbelief, but it quickly turned to anger. He lunged forward, grabbing me and shaking me as I tried to articulate something, anything, that would make him stop. He hurt me, my head jerking back and forth as he shook me, and I couldn't make a sound as he tried to shake me to death. You're not one of them. There were only 5 of them. There's always been 5 of them. Why are you here? Why are you torturing? Why are you... Something hit him in the face and he fell back into the grass, clutching his cheek. Something wet, sticky, rolled down his neck, and I had a moment of fear as I wondered if it might be his eye. It wasn't. I saw that when he pulled his hand away as the second one hit him. I saw it was an egg, when a third and a fourth joined in. "Get off him, you killer. Haven't you killed enough children?" I turned to see 3 children on the opposite pavement, a carton of eggs between their feet and their hands already throwing more. The man scuttled backwards, shielding his face as he went, and disappeared into the grass as more eggs fell. I heard the crunch of old weeds, followed by the slam of a door. And when I heard trainers coming towards me, I put my hand up in case the eggs came flying my way. "You okay, kid?" I looked up to see a Power Ranger, the red one, reaching out to help me up. It was Ryan, someone who would become my best friend over the next few days. "Yeah," I said, taking his hand. I looked over to where the other ghosts had been, but they were all gone. I guess they'd got what they came for. "Oh, let me help you with that," he said, taking off the sheet and folding it a little as he draped it around me. After a few minutes of fiddling with it, his friends came over to help. He had made a half-decent toga out of it. His friends, soon to be my friends, Rob and Patrick, agreed that it looked a lot better, although it clashed badly with their Power Ranger costumes. "Hey, you're the kid who just moved in with Hammy, right?" Ryan asked. "I'm Ryan. This is Patrick and Robert, just Rob," he insisted as he waved. They invited me to come with them and threw another dozen or so eggs at the house the man had crawled back into. They didn't seem angry about it. They did it as if it was an expected chore and seemed almost bored. They left the rubbish in the yard before picking up their bikes and heading back the way I'd come, towards the happy sounds of our active street. "Why are you egging his house?" I asked, the four of us passing more children on our way with eggs. "Did he do something to you?" I expected them to laugh, or maybe to act proud of what they'd done, but they just shrugged. It was a look I sometimes saw on people who were voting or volunteering, bored, but sure of their actions, and it was something that was hard to make sense of at the age of 10. We egg his house every year. Everybody does. Nobody likes Horace Jenkins, but especially not on Halloween. "Why?" I asked, still confused. "Same reason I bet nobody gives you candy. Nobody wears ghost costumes, after what he did." "But what did he do?" I said, starting to get annoyed. Ryan turned like he was going to yell at me for being stupid, but he seemed to remember that I was new, so he probably decided to explain. It was about 15 years ago, long before we were born. Horace Jenkins was the owner of a company, something that was doing well around here, but it didn't make people like him. Horace Jenkins, from what my dad says, was a mean man. He didn't treat people right. He was rude. He didn't support the community, but he was rich, so people let him stay. One Halloween night about 15 years ago, he came home drunk from a party he'd been to with a rich friend of his, and, he ran over 5 kids in ghost costumes. He was all over the news. People knew he did it, but he got some hotshot lawyer to get him off without jail time. They said the kids were running across the road. They said Horace wasn't really drunk, and they cast a lot of doubt and made a lot of deals. I mean, that's what Dad says. After that, Horace tried to pay off the families, but they wouldn't take the money. Nobody in town would take his money. Nobody would work for his company. He lost everything when his wife left him. She took his house, his cars, his kids, and he was left with this little house and I guess not much else. The people here let him stay in the house, but they let him know that we haven't forgotten him. After the accident, it was considered kind of disrespectful to wear ghost costumes anymore, so nobody does it. They didn't know you were the new kid on the block. They just thought you were mean and, now they know better. Hey, Caesar. Caesar became my nickname after that, and my makeshift toga got me a lot of candy before the streetlights went out. I spent some time after that trading sweets with my new friends.